Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And Shadowlands Season 4 is coming out in just one day. I wanted to cover what I'm going to be considering the top 5 PvP specializations in anticipation for the patch based on the amount of changes that we have recently seen. And there was a lot of changes. I will have a link to that video after this. So if you want to go specifically and look in detail at that, but I wanted to cover those changes and then relate them to what I think could potentially be a shift of meta, and also talk about how amazing the trajectory of PvP could be if these types of changes continue to happen moving forward into the future. So the first specialization that you're going to want to keep an eye on, again, this is a good list for trying to pick like a main or maybe what type of comp or what types of strategies you want to try and go and employ. The first spec that comes in is Elemental Shaman. This is a spec that's already really powerful, does tremendous damage, maybe the highest damage of any spec in the game. And if it comes down to a sustained damage meta, honestly, I probably should have put Elemental Shaman higher on this now that I'm reconsidering this, just because of how powerful its damage is. Some of the weaknesses it had was things like Retribution Paladin Warriors, Death Knights, Demon Hunters, these melee cleaves, and all of those are receiving nerfs. We see that with Spell Warden now, only a 25% effectiveness, Brutal Grasp, Necrolord Conduit, so the Slappy Hands getting nerfed in effectiveness, Ret Paladin burst damage getting brought down by a slight margin as well. So bringing down all the power of those melee cleaves is going to enable Elemental Shaman. If it ends up being a spellcaster sustained damage meta, then Elemental Shaman's probably going to be the best. I actually probably should have put this much higher really when I'm considering this, but this is definitely a patch to check out. Elemental Shaman, there is no doubt about that. Moving into the number 4 position, which might come as a bit of a surprise, and honestly this should have been higher than what I put it. Survival Hunter receiving sustained, which is receiving sustained damage buffs to Raptor Strike, Mongoose Bite, and Kill Command by 15%. I think that Jungle Cleave is likely shifting to a Discipline Priest from a Holy Priest with the nerfs that we are seeing incoming to Holy Priests. So also possibly Survival Hunter being able to compete with the sustained damage that Beast Mastery was able to put out, while still bringing in benefits that the Beast Mastery doesn't have in terms of utility and roots and crowd control. So definitely a good patch to check out the Survival Hunter. Super fun specialization, completely unique experience, and I thought something that was worth highlighting. Maybe not going to be as powerful as the LA Shaman, which is why I should have probably shifted the order of this, but definitely a spec worth checking out. Coming in the number 3 position is going to be the Arcane Mage. This is a spec that's it was forgotten, I don't know, to the dust of time for a while here. At the bottom of the barrel, it's receiving some buffs with clear casting duration being increased, Arcane Missiles damage being increased by 15%, as well as Fire Mage specifically being targeted towards its Blazing Barrier effectiveness in PvP. So the tankiness of Fire Mage going down, Holy Priest stocks going down, Outlaw Rogue stocks going down slightly to potentially impede how powerful that composition has been for some time, is going to be giving an opportunity for Arcane Mage to potentially step in, especially if sustained damage ends up being powerful. Although Arcane has tended to fit in kind of a burst moment in terms of meta, so still kind of wait and see, although Arcane Missiles damage can still be really good for burst. This spec could be good. Again, I probably should have put Elemental ahead of this now that I'm reconsidering how powerful it was, but this could be a great spec to check out Arcane, just with its overall damage and getting buffed, and with the healing reductions of Fire Mage. Moving into the second position is now going to be the Affliction Warlock, and the Affliction Warlock is receiving massive damage buffs across the board, with Unstable Affliction damage going up 15%, the Dispel of Unstable Affliction damage going up 20%, and Corruption damage going up 30%. This is at a trade-off with your Dark Soul, your haste benefit getting nerfed by 10%, and right now at the moment, Affliction Warlock is pretty much only do damage and cooldowns. That's pretty much how the game just works at the moment for all classes. So my hope is that with this round of changes that's focused on buffing sustain, is that the cooldowns are not going to be as important for these classes specifically that are receiving these sustained damage buffs, and that they're able to accomplish victories outside of windows where their cooldowns are active, and see a type of shift there into more of a sustained damage based meta with double spellcasters, Affliction benefiting the same way as I said for Elemental Shaman, with Demon Hunter getting nerfed on sustained damage, Death Knight survivability getting brought down, melee cleaves being reduced. Warlock is probably still going to struggle with things like Jungle, and Jungle still looks to be like a very powerful comp, but with Holy being nerfed, possibly the sustained damage is going to be able to slip through and penetrate through their survivability and cut them down a bit faster, which could open up big opportunities for double spellcaster. Moving into the number 1 position, just talking about holy nerfs, is what I'm anticipating to be the best healer, which is Restoration Druid. Greater Fade is now going up to a 60-second cooldown. The 4-set bonus is getting a 12% nerf to Holy Priest. Flash heal is getting a 10% nerf in PvP, and your heal is also getting a 10% nerf in PvP. And I would say that Resto Druid is like a really close second at the moment in terms of best healer, especially things with Ret Warrior, but also Demonology Warlocks, Affliction Warlocks, these double spellcasters, right? Resto Druid has kind of been the staple for that, but it is important to note that Mistweaver could still be very, very, very powerful, especially if it ends up being a dot meta, because Mistweaver is probably the best healer to bring into that. So keep Mistweaver on the back of your mind. I still left it off the table just because it didn't really receive anything significant in this round of changes, whereas Resto Druid has kind of always been a pretty safe go-to. And with all the nerfs that we saw to Outlaw Rogues, Subtlety Rogues, Sepsis Assassination Rogues, like these burst rogue specs, it's my anticipation that like Ellie Shaman's going to have a really good shot. Resto Druid, Ellie Shaman has great synergy, and then with all these spellcasters that they can pick and choose between, whether it's Shadow Priest or Warlocks, potentially balanced Druids, this type of deal, that you could be shifting into a Resto Druid Wizard meta, or possibly a Resto Shaman Wizard meta, as we saw some buffs to Resto Shaman. If you want to see those changes, they will be in the video linked after this. But with the honorable mentions, these are other specs that could possibly crawl in, but I wasn't 100% confident on them. And these are specs like Frost Mage getting 15% buffs to its Ice Lance and its Frozen Orb, again focusing on its just ability to do damage outside of its Necrolord Covenant, which is really good. Balanced Druid is receiving buffs to its Starfall. I'm definitely jumping in immediately onto Necrolord Balanced Druid to try and see if I can make a Starfall build work, hoping that I can get an Affliction Warlock to pair up with me and see how much sustained damage we can do now that Death Knights are going to be less invincible. Outlaw Rogue's probably still going to be a problem. I'm still going to wait and see if Outlaw Holy Priest ends up being the main synergy. Again, the cooldown reductions between the two of them, the way they share, even after getting nerfed, is probably still going to be really powerful. It might be tough to overcome, but nerfs to the Fire Mage survivability as well means that potentially these dots are going to be sticking in and getting more pressure. These buffs to Shadow aren't necessarily going to impact them directly in PvP, but as a result of the other changes to other specializations, the survivability of Death Knights more particularly, damage of Demon Hunter, damage of Ret going down, this type of deal, is that Shadow Priest could have really good opportunities to pair up with Warlocks again, Resto Druids, Resto Shamans, Mistweaver Monks, these types of Wizard Cleave spellcasters, potentially Arcane with Warlock as well, could be really good moving into this patch. I'm very excited to see how it shifts the game. I'm hoping that if it doesn't shift it enough, that we see more changes like this in this direction, because this is how the classes are going to end up being made to be the most fun. So this is kind of a shift in the trajectory going up, and then hopefully it hits the mark. If it doesn't, hopefully we get a couple more changes to continue that trend, so we can get the game more into like a sustained damage meta, because it's been just cooldowns activate, oh my goodness, cooldowns are gone, falling asleep for such a long time, that I'm hoping that we can have some high intensity outside of the cooldown windows. And these changes are a good first step and are going to open up a lot of potential here moving into season 4. So I hope that you enjoyed my coverage of my top 5 specs, my discussion and my anticipation of this. I hope it's helped you kind of try and pick something if you're thinking about it moving forward into the next patch. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one.